We always love to shine the spotlight on people that are inspiring in the lymphedema community. And I have been a fan of this woman ever since I began researching the lymphedema community. Veronica Seneriz is our guest today, and she has an amazing resume and an even more amazing heart for people, and it shines through in everything that she does. She is a national advocate, speaker, founder, and owner of Lymphie Strong. You probably already are quite aware of that group, and she currently serves as the social media manager for one of my favorite organizations, the National Lymphedema Network. Veronica, it is so wonderful to have you here today.
Thank you so much for having me. I am humbled and honored to be here speaking with you today. I know we've been working at meeting up for quite some time, and finally everything has aligned, and I'm just so happy to be here with you today.
I'm so happy too. And I read your background story. And part of the reason we do these interviews is to help people see faces and hear stories that they can relate to so that they can find hope as they manage their own condition. You in 1994 were developed third generation lymphedema. Now, I'd never heard of this term before. And if I butcher it, you fix it for me. Lymphedema distichiasis syndrome. Is that correct?
That is correct.
What is that?
The lymphedema distichiasis syndrome is lymphedema with the genetic marker of a double row of eyelashes. So the irony behind all of that is that I didn't find out that my eyelashes were connected to the swelling in my legs until 2016. So it actually took 22 years. And in that time, every time I had always gone for a routine eye exam, the ophthalmologist would say, do you realize how incredibly rare it is to have a second set of eyelashes? And now it's not glamorous at all. The second row actually curl in towards my cornea, and I actually had really good vision as a child, but as I grew older, when I went to university and I had to start wearing glasses, and slowly over time, it's given me astigmatism just because they rub up against the eyeball. There are a lot of complications that are associated with this syndrome. I think it's one of 19 identified in the hereditary or primary lymphedema spectrum. It comes with varicose veins, chronic venous insufficiency, scoliosis. You can be born with cleft palate, a syndrome that affects droopiness of the eyes. So, and I think probably the most serious is congenital heart defects.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually have an uncle, well, 7 members on the paternal side of my family have been affected by the syndrome in one form or fashion. And I actually had an uncle who passed away this past August. He had to have a heart transplant about 12 years ago. I think in my mind, even though I can't prove it, it may have been associated with the syndrome.
My heart goes out to you, and yet I'm thinking about the people watching right now who may have some of those markers and never connected the dots, who will have their aha moment. And then I'm also so inspired by the woman that you are. And even though facing this particular challenge, you give back. So how did that journey happen? How did you go from having the eye doctor notice this to connecting it with your swollen limbs?
Well, my journey was a little bit backwards, but it also had a little bit of an advantage, if you will. Because I was third generation, my father, well, first of all, my grandfather had lymphedema, bilateral lymphedema. He was never diagnosed in his entire lifetime. And then it took about 25 years for my father to get diagnosed. And the way we were diagnosed, Brenda, was on a billboard. So as you hear my story, it will sort of come full circle. When I presented in 1994, I graduated with my degree in 1998. By that time, I was 4 years into my ankle swelling. I was actually afraid to tell my father that I was beginning to swell. My father endured over 100 bouts of cellulitis in his lifetime. 3 times he went septic. I remember as a child being scooped up in the middle of the night, my parents rushing to the ER, my father violently shaking from fever, from cellulitis, and they didn't have a name for it. They just kept calling it cellulitis. But, you know, cellulitis is not lymphedema. We lived in a very small town, which essentially had two hospitals. You know, we did the best we could, and everyone did the best they could. I can't, you know, we can't look back and blame doctors or facilities, or, I mean, you know what you know. There's so many people even today that have never heard of it, and it's a journey, you know. I read a quote during, I think it was Rare Disease Day, and it says the journey with a rare disease is sometimes feels like a decades-long investigation with a lot of blind alleys and a lot of twists and turns, and that's exactly what this is. So as a child, I witnessed all of that, and I had a very, very deep realization that my father could die. You know, children normally don't think of those things, but what I witnessed all in all those times going to the hospital was fairly traumatic. So I was actually afraid, and
You were afraid to tell your dad.
I was afraid, and my mother convinced me. She's like, you know, you got to tell him, and she did it with me. She's like, let's sit down and let's talk to him. And he turned around and he punched a hole in the wall. He was so upset. And he said, I don't know what we have. I don't know what they call it. We don't have a name for it, but I'm so sorry I gave you this. And
So I want to just pause for a moment, and I want to honor your dad, because he was doing the best he could. And you know that, and I know that. And as Maya Angelou says, when you know better, you do better.
yeah.
And so though his journey went to one certain point, I don't know the rest of your story, but I just know how proud he is that you have taken this. And instead of having to apologize to anybody, you are inspiring and lifting up hearts. So I honor you for that, and I honor your dad for that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You know, and it was in that moment when I saw his reaction that I felt it. I said, it's okay. Whatever it is, whatever it's called, we'll tackle it together. You know, we'll be a team. And so
how did you team up? What did you do then? Talk about the old battle cry, you know?
That team up took 20 years, Brenda. Wow. It did. It took 20 years because I was young, and the only thing he knew to tell me to do was to elevate, to wear my compression, and to avoid hazardous situations, cuts, bites. And he only knew that from all the times he got cellulitis. He personally observed. He didn't have internet. He didn't have a textbook on lymphology. He didn't, all he had was his common sense and his wits about him. And he noticed and personally observed that every time he got cellulitis, it was because of some nick, cut, scratch. He was a welder. So that in and of itself, you know, a machine shop is full of dirt flying and materials. He told me, he said, you need to finish school. You cannot get a job and stand on your feet all day. If you do, your leg will turn into mine. We don't have a name. Again, he kept stressing how we don't have a name for this. There's no doctor for this. So he really pushed me. And when I graduated, I was driving down the freeway. I was all excited. It was my first job, you know, in the real world. So naive and green, you know. I was driving down the freeway, my first day at work, and I saw this billboard that had two legs that looked like my father's one leg. And I'm amazed that I just didn't wreck. You know, this is Houston, Texas.
Imagine you're driving, you're like, what?
It's Houston, Texas. There's a million people on the road trying to get in, commuting, and I see this billboard, and I literally, my head just literally, my jaw dropped. I was like, and it said, if you have swelling, you may have lymphedema, and it had a number to call. And I drove in, and all of my excitement about the job, I couldn't stop thinking about that billboard the whole first day. I couldn't stop thinking. So when I drove back, you know, back then it was 1998. I think I had an Ikea, but we didn't have smartphones or anything like that. And I turned around and I literally wrote down the information. I pulled off on the side of the road. So I called my parents that day, and they got on the phone. They had the phone in between them. And I said, I think Dad and I have this thing called lymphedema. And my dad said, what? What the hell is that? And I said, I have no idea. But I saw this word, and I saw these two legs, and it was a billboard. And there's this 1-800 number that you can call, and we can make an appointment. And the office was right nearby. It's right next door to Channel 2 Houston. You know, it's like a big old thing there, big old tower. And so that's what he did. That's when my mother called. She made an appointment. We both went to the appointment together. They evaluated him, and they looked at my leg. And it was sort of bittersweet because my father was admitted for therapy, but they denied me treatment. They said I was very, very mild. Essentially, I was stage 0. And so they said, don't worry, you'll never be as bad as your dad. You just have to take care of your leg. And so he got the full, he received 8 weeks of CDT, and he stayed with me in my apartment that entire time. He was able to reduce by 40%. His leg, he was able to fit in a shoe again. Up until that time, for the last few years, all he could fit into was a house slipper that was cut down the middle. So his quality of life had really deteriorated. And when they did the CDT, he could fit into a shoe again. He could wear jeans without them having to be bell bottoms or really, you know, baggy.
He got a new lease on life.
Got a new lease
of
on
that
life.
billboard.
And he was so happy. I remember the therapist telling him, we're so sorry that we can't reduce you all the way down to a normal looking limb. He goes, I don't care. This is great. I can wear a shoe again. And, you know, the rest was fibrosis. That was a dramatic improvement. And Brenda, the other part of that was once he got CDT, he stopped having the cellulitis bouts. they really just slowed down because he was in the hospital like 4 or 5 times a year. Um,
And
and
that is
after
agonizing for a family to continually have those
that,
trips
it
to the
is.
emergency room. It's an emotional roller coaster as well as a physical one for everybody involved. I just think it's so amazing that he encouraged you to go to school and get your degree. And because you did that, you were going to your new job, seeing that billboard. And I want to say for all the people watching, there might be people with lymphedema who can't wear regular shoes. This is a lesson in you can improve. There are
Yes,
ways to address this condition and manage it. You know, of course, I work for Lympha Press. We're all about pneumatic compression, but whatever it takes, there are things you can do so that you don't have to feel hopeless and helpless.
absolutely.
I'm so glad.
Absolutely.
How gratifying for you to see your dad enjoy that 40% reduction.
Yeah. And I was part of it. I rolled the bandages, I washed them, we tracked his food, we tracked his exercise. I was living in an apartment back then, of course, and he'd walk around the apartment in his bandages. And I mean, he did everything they said to do to be in compliance. And then after that, my journey started, and I sort of kind of just went along. Um, And I knew that MLD existed. I just didn't know the full sequence. All he told me that was that the thoracic ducts was so important, and to clear up here in the axillary and up above the collarbone. But he didn't go into the rest of the series. So I went along, and being the typical child, parent, my dad telling me you need to wear your compression, I only wore it when it was convenient. I only wore it when it was, I was wearing jeans or pants where when it could be hidden. I thought that compression was masculine for some reason, because I guess I in my mind had associated his compression with being very manly. I know I meet a lot of men who think that it's pantyhose, but for me, I thought the opposite. And, I think that just goes to your environment and what you're exposed to. And
Absolutely. And our cultural expectations at certain times. Now, compression is commonplace for even moderate
athlete,
athletes or
yeah,
whatever. But there was a time when it marked you as being different. And for women particularly who care about aesthetics and vanity, and there's nothing wrong with that. I
nothing wrong.
talked to so many women, primary lymphedema, who at a young age were like, you know what? I'm not wearing that compression because I don't want to look different. I want to wear my pretty outfits and my spike heels. And
Yes,
so
that
you
was me.
probably
That
paid the
was me
price
in
for
my
that,
20s.
though.
That was me in my 20s, and I was very stubborn about it. And unfortunately, it all came to a head for me because I got on a plane in October of 2007 on what should have been a dream vacation. And I flew from Houston to Honolulu without compression on either leg. I didn't know that I was supposed to wear compression. I didn't know what I didn't know. And within a few hours of stepping off that plane, I went bilateral. My left leg started to swell up, and it was shocking. I was devastated. There I was in this glorious paradise, Waikiki Beach and the Big Island, Oahu, and um, my
Now
legs were sore.
you said something really important, which I really like, which is you can't get angry about what you didn't know, or
Right?
even at the medical professionals. But I am a little bit annoyed that they dismissed your stage 0 and did not give you tools so that you could have foreseen this. Now, I know everything works together for good, and what
Mhm.
you have learned has helped so many other people, but it may be stage 0, but it still needs attention.
Right. And that's part of what it is, part of my mission with Lymphie Strong, is that we, within my group or within my community, I make a concerted effort, a very concerted effort to treat everyone the same, whether you're stage 0 or a more advanced stage. We share the same information. When I first went online with my advocacy, and I'm digressing on a tangent here, but when I first went online, there were many people who said that I didn't have lymphedema and that I was a fraud, because I had reduced my legs. And I faced a lot of online bashing for that I couldn't possibly know what it is to have lymphedema because my legs were anatomically very close to normal, or they looked normal. And I hadn't been online when my legs were bigger. So I am very, very sensitive to that fact. I know in other interviews, I've called it a chip on my shoulder, and I've kind of let that go too. I'm not the same person that I was, a year ago, 2 years ago. And even the journey in advocacy evolves. The more people that you meet, the more stories that you hear. When I first started my advocacy journey, it was about multi-generational primary lymphedema. I wanted to highlight that. And then the more stories that I read, the more just people that I met from across the country, from all of the events. I mean, you have my about all of the events across the country. I've met people who have had lymphedema from car accidents, from getting hit by a drunk driver, from surgeries, from medical error, there's no story that really surprises me anymore. And what I found that is it's really about patient education and self-advocacy. Because if you have those two tools, then I think that you're able to navigate this path a lot better.
So
I always use the car analogy. Like when I'm shopping, I think that shopping for compression should be like shopping for a car. What your budget is going to be. You have an idea of the make and the model. You're going to go around and scout maybe for a few months to get the best deal. I think that getting compression and the tools that you need for lymphedema self-treatment and management should be the same thing. You should be educated on it.
So you're in Hawaii, you present as bilateral. This was supposed to be a dream vacation. It ended up to be a little bit of a nightmare.
It did. And of course,
What
I called my
happened
father.
next?
I called my father. There was, I think, an 8-hour time zone difference. And I was crying on the phone. And he said, "Oh, that's okay. That's fine." Like, what do you mean it's fine? I'm not fine. Do you hear me? I'm not fine. And he said, "Oh, well, my dad was, he didn't say bilateral. He said, my dad had it in both legs." And I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "Your grandfather had lymphedema in both legs." And I didn't know that. I didn't know that that was possible. I didn't know that that was a potential. I didn't know that when you are primary lymphedema, it's really a systemic issue and it can really pop up anywhere. Doesn't have to stay in one area. So I think what happened that day is my left leg became overwhelmed, and then, it carried over. I mean, all of the clinicians and the doctors and the scientists in our community know the technical details. But so I didn't know, but my dad knew. My dad knew from common sense and from personal observation. And he said, "It's no big deal. You're going to manage it just the way you would your one foot." And So that gave me a sense of calm, in that, okay, this is something that happened. I'm not the only person in the world that's probably endured this. And I went about my vacation. Once he told me that it was fine, essentially, I kind of just blocked it out and went on about my vacation and my life. And when I came back home, I really noticed the difference. I mean, my life started to, and I had just lost my mother the year before. So
Yeah.
things really went downhill. And I went to a doctor in 2010. And I asked what I could do. We did some wrapping and stuff, and I found out later that it wasn't necessarily the gold standard for complete decongestive therapy. And I don't want to dwell on that. Again, falls back to patient education. Had I known what complete decongestive therapy was all about, what it should be, and the sequence and the wrapping and all of that, then I would have been able to say, hey, this is not correct. We need to remedy this, or I need to move to another facility. But he told me, up until then, I had been managing with exercise, with my legs exercise. I noticed that every time I did step aerobics, my legs would go down. My legs would go down, every time. So I would go like 5 times a week, every day after work, and strength training, the whole 9 yards. The gym was my life because that's what kept my legs down. I would wear, I don't know if you remember, Brenda, those old Reeboks that had the, the high top.
Yes.
And then I started wearing the Veronicas. Those were the perfect shoe for me because I'd put my feet in those high tops, do my step aerobics, and by the time I went home and was going to bed the next morning, my legs were normal. They were perfect. Yeah. So I asked the doctor, can I continue? Is it okay for me to exercise? Am I doing any damage? And he started laughing at me. He said, you have lymphedema in both legs. Are you crazy? You want to exercise like 2-step aerobics stuff? You need to just stick to brisk walking. Forget the gym. Forget all that. Just walk, elevate, and do what you can to stay off your feet. And I started crying. I bawled and all of that. Fast forward 4 years. So this is a really long journey, and I'm sorry that it's taking so long.
Oh, no. Let me tell you, every step of this journey, there's someone out there watching right now and saying, oh my goodness, I was told the same thing. Oh no, I needed to learn this. This is so valuable. I do a lot of interviews with the lipedema population as well. And for many years, those women, and they are primarily women, were told, don't exercise, you can make the condition worse. And
Yes.
we now know that movement is so important. So your body was telling you movement is good, but your doctor was telling you movement was bad.
Yes.
How do you reconcile that, Veronica?
I was in tears. I spiraled into a really deep depression. I gained like 70 pounds. And then in 2014, I went to my doctor. I went for a wellness exam. And my gynecologist had known me since 1998 when I moved to Houston. So he had been my doctor for those 20 years, almost 20 years. And, I was there on the table and he saw my legs and he said, Veronica, what the H? And I had known him all those years, never heard him be unprofessional. He said, what is wrong with your legs? I am deeply concerned here. And I said, my lymphedema is out of control and I don't know where to go. I don't know what to do. I don't want to go back to the doctor that I went to in 2010. And I just started crying. I mean, ugly crying. And he said, okay, let's finish the exam. After that, we'll go into my office and I'm going to make some calls. And I was like, okay. And at that point, I only had one pair of shoes that would fit me. And they were basically these expandable ballet type flats, they're really stretchy, but they were like stretched all the way to the, I'm surprised I could even put them on still. And so we went to his office, and this is a teachable moment. Okay, this is a teachable moment that I always share. He got on the phone with one of his, he graduated from Harvard. He was in this frat, so he called one of his Harvard buddies. And I didn't know that at the time. I just saw him making the call, but he told me after the fact. And he got on the phone and he said, I have a patient that I've had for many, many years. She has hereditary lymphedema. And this is what he did. He goes, wait, do not hang up. Listen to my question. If she had BCRL, where would you send her? Don't tell me that you don't treat hereditary patients. Don't tell me you don't know about primary lymphedema. I want to know, where would you send her if she had BCRL in
Now, for
Houston?
those who don't know what BCRL is,
It's breast cancer related lymphedema.
got it.
So in that moment, two worlds came together for me, because had there not been so much research, and this is where I think, a lot of the division needs to go away between secondary and primary, because had that research not done on the BCRL front, that abbreviation would not be recognized in the medical community and would not be a gateway for people like me who have hereditary.
Wow. That's a significant moment. And
It
so
was.
did that doctor get an answer?
He did. I got sent to a very good place here in Houston, Memorial Hermann. The other amazing fact after that is the outpatient facility that I go to is a mere 2.5 miles from my home. I have no idea how many times I passed it, going to get groceries, going about my normal life. It's literally around the corner. Not joking. It probably takes less than 10 minutes to drive there. And I think it probably takes longer to park than it does to drive. And that whole time it was there. And we did CDT. And we went to a certain point, and I had the most amazing certified lymphedema therapist ever in the world. I think she hangs the moon. I really do. She's my confidant. She's my friend. She's everything. I'm not allowed to release her name because she's very private, but I really think she hangs the moon. And this is what she told me. She said, we've been working on swelling that has accumulated over 20 years. So I can only get you so far. The rest of the work is up to you. You are going to have to work on getting into those shoes. And that was part of what she did as the first exercise. Like the second or third appointment, she said, I want you to bring me a pair of shoes that you want to fit into. I want to see it. I want to see your style. And I did that. And she says, okay, we're going to try and make this happen. Okay, we're going to try. So I kept wrapping. I put on nighttime. I didn't know about nighttime compression at the time. And I was able, it took almost an entire year, but it happened gradually. Like first, the top of my feet went down, then my ankles, then my calves, and my knees. And And then by October of 2015 is when the reduction was complete.
I am sure with every bit of progress, your heart just was swelling with hope again. And
yeah,
you
and it
got
was
your
my
life
dad.
back.
My dad really pushed. I mean, you know, I would call him and he would know. Sometimes I would get frustrated because of course the wrapping and the rolling and we would talk. My dad liked to talk smack. He really did. He was funny, you know, he liked to watch football and just that kind of character that was always making jokes and stuff. And he'd say, "Oh, come on, I'm an old man and you're having trouble donning, you know, I bet I could beat you. You know, you want to race?" Putting on that tie. I called him
I love
crying.
that.
It's taken me like almost 30 minutes to put on my stocking. And I'm like, how do you do this? How do you put it on so fast? He's, oh, it's nothing. I just do it in a snap. And here I am sweating and my makeup, you know, I'm just like, my hair's all kinds of ways trying to put it on. And then when I finally mastered that, I said, okay, I'm ready to race. And he said, oh, now you're picking on an old person. It was fun. We had a lot of laughs. We had a lot of laughs.
Your dad is really an underlying star of your story. He really is.
He turned difficult situations into laughable moments.
And, oh, how wonderful. What a gift he gave you.
Yeah, so I reduced, and then, you know, I went online and I saw all of this doom and gloom. I don't know why I never Googled lymphedema before in terms of social media. But I did, and then I joined a lot of groups and I saw a lot of negativity, a lot of venting, a lot of anger. And I looked at my dad and I said, you're not like this. So what is it about you that's different from these people? And what can we do to share that with the world? And I talked to him and I said, I think it was like a Sunday dinner or something. And I said, I have this idea. There's this thing called a blog. And I think that if we share your story, it'll help people not only find treatment or know what treatment is as far as the CDT and the reduction, but how you maintain your positivity, how you maintain your sense of humor, how you just always find a way, and how you survived all of those bouts of cellulitis. And so I said, you know, we have there's a thing called a blog, and it's a blog. He didn't like the internet. He thought it was I don't want to put words in his mouth, but he just didn't really think, you know, he was always like, things are better in person. I'd rather read a physical newspaper, you know, that kind of attitude. And he's like, what's a blog? And I said, well, a blog is sort of like a newspaper that you write yourself and other people read it. You write whatever you want. And he's like, why would people read about lymphedema? It's depressing. And I said, well, no, not to depress people, but to educate them and share, you know, what you've learned, everything that you've told me over the phone, we can share. And he's like, you think anybody will read it? And I said, I don't know, but if they don't, I can always delete it and we can pretend like it never happened. And he said, okay, if it helps just one person,
I love him.
Have my blessing to create this blog.
Oh, and so that was the beginning of your advocacy.
Yes.
Was it called Lymphie Strong then?
Yes. I liked, no, it was called Stay Lymphie Strong. So I kind of tried to put, like stay strong, but
Mhm.
stay, and I tried, stay lymph strong, and I tried lymph strong, and I played with it a little bit, and I started with stay lymph strong, and then after a while I changed it because it was like, no, you don't want to stay, you want to be cured. You want to move on. So I dropped the stay, and now it's just lymph strong.
I love it. So you had no idea how it would grow. When did you start to realize, oh, I'm onto something here?
The first time was when I was asked to speak at the Plano Walk in Texas for Learn. I was a patient story speaker, and that's when I saw a whole, essentially one stadium full of people with lymphedema. I hadn't met anybody other than my dad and my family members, and so seeing all of them in person was just life altering. I mean, I had people who walked up to me and just started crying. They would hug me and they started crying, and they said, "We love your group. We love your blog. Thank you so much for your advocacy." And that was the first time. And then the second time was in 2017 when I went to the first National Lymphedema Network conference. That was when I really saw, from a medical standpoint, as you know, as being part of the Lympha Press organization, how much medical research, how much effort, how many people have dedicated their entire careers to lymphology. And here I was as a patient thinking nobody was doing anything and nobody cared.
And
It
now,
gave me
because of you,
such profound hope. And in that moment, when I returned from that trip, I said, all of my group needs to know this information. Not just the ones that can travel, not just the ones that can walk, not just the ones that can fly or live close to the conference area. Everybody needs to know this information. Every single patient or every single caregiver, friend, everybody needs to know this is going on. And I went from just the blog and the little Facebook group to creating a platform. This is where I used my IT background.
yeah, I
Uh,
wanted to say, so here you are, you're a very accomplished IT professional for many years. So you were doing a full-time job and building this advocacy platform.
yes,
And
yeah,
all those skill sets merged. So you have your profession and your passion now combined, which I'm excited
yes,
about talking about this new chapter in your
yes.
life.
My profession, my passion became my purpose. That's what happened. And it's taken me a couple of years to realize that and look back, because when you're in the process of evolving, you don't really know, when you're in a journey of transition and you feel a calling that is outside the norm, because when people ask me what I do today, their eyes kind of glass over, and especially if they're former coworkers, they don't really understand it. But yeah, I started leveraging my IT experience, and I said, okay, I'm going to build this. And so Lymphie Strong became 3 groups. And then I went to Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn some, and I'm even on Pinterest. It's just wherever I can be that billboard that changed my life, driving down the freeway in 1998. I am that billboard now.
Yes, you are.
Or
And
not just me, the community of Lymphie Strong, because it's not just me anymore. It's the entire community that supports that vision.
And now, full circle, you are affiliated with the NLN and help run their social platforms, right?
That was so, it was, for, I know you and I, well, I'm a believer And it was just so
Divinely inspired.
divine intervention, because it happened by pure happenstance. I think it's such an amazing, amazing organization. It changed my life in 2017. I had met Jeanette Zucker when she invited me to be a fashion model for that particular conference. So I got to go down the runway with, I don't know if you were at that event, but it was
I
a
wasn't.
really fun and cool thing. There was so much work that went on behind the scenes because it was quite a production. I think there was maybe 20 of us, 25 of us that went down the runway, and we were modeling garments, and it was literally a catwalk. And I met Jeanette, and she said, "Vern, I'm so happy you're here. Thank you for coming." And I mean, it was great. Aside from all of the information that was coming from the technical part, this was more of a social, like the social end of it. And so Jeanette has always been, sort of like a mentor, someone in the community that I've always kept in touch with since then, since 2017. And when I reached out to her about the webinar series that we were doing, we got to talking, and it just happened. It was just a conversation that organically transpired, and
So
I was like,
wonderful.
I would be humbled and honored to help NLN in any way possible. I think it's, and the beauty of that is, on the team, I'm the only patient to my knowledge. It's clinicians, and so in the beginning, I was very intimidated, of course, because I don't have a formal clinical background, nor do I present myself as such. I never say that I'm a clinician. I always have the disclaimer that I'm only a patient. But the team is so phenomenal that I don't feel like there's that division at all. And working behind the scenes and being able to provide feedback from a patient perspective on some of the topics that we covered.
Oh, it's so invaluable. Invaluable.
It,
Like I don't mean to cut you off, but like we have two of our compression therapy consultants, Cam Ayala and Mary Castleberg, and they have lymphedema, and they are some of the best people to represent our product because they walk the walk, they use the product, they understand the challenges of our patient population. So I think better than any PhD, what you bring to the table is so valuable, Veronica. That's
it is
wonderful.
it's wonderful. I love the NLN. I love the team that I work with. I love Jeanette. She's amazing. It has been a phenomenal opportunity. I think you even shared it even 3 weeks in, that as much as I've done in the last 6 years in being a patient advocate, every day this past month, during this, I learned something new. I promise you, I learned something new that blew my mind, and I was like, wow, that makes total sense. Why did I never think of that before? Or how did that not cross my path? And all the people that I've come across and all the stories. There was something every single day that just really hit me, and I learned. There's so much to learn about lymphology. I think it's an incredible field. I think it's an underrepresented field of medicine, but I think we're at the tip of the iceberg in terms of it exploding in the medical community at some point
Agreed.
in the near future.
Agreed. And how thrilling to be part of it. How thrilling to be a part of it. And now
In some small way. I mean, I know I'm just one person, and you and I are two people, but collectively, if we all
watch
band
out,
together
world.
and we put all of our talents, whatever they may be, towards getting the message out about awareness and the importance of lymphatic health. Lymphatic health is so important. It's so critically important to so many major mechanisms of the body,
Yeah.
as we're learning every day.
So
Discuss.
I want to keep this interview from taking your entire day, although I could spend hours, and I look forward to the day when I can see you in person and even give you a real hug instead of a virtual one.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
let's take this last minute and talk to the people watching, the ones that are looking for hope and help. What would you take this last moment and say to them?
I would say that you are braver and stronger than you ever thought possible. And never stop believing in yourself. Never stop self-advocating, no matter the situation. You have lymphedema, lymphedema doesn't have you.
Well said. Drop the microphone. That was perfect. And one of the best hours I've ever spent with anyone, and I've done close to 100 interviews over the last year. Thank you, Veronica. I look forward to getting to know you even better and working with you more closely in the future. And thank you, everyone, for tuning into this edition of the Lymphedema Channel. It's our honor to share stories like Veronica's. If you know somebody that would make a wonderful interview, send them my way, bviola@medsoulsupplier.com. Until then, have a wonderful day. And until then, blessings, Veronica.
God bless you, Brenda. Thank you so much.